Uncle here. Welcome back. It's another Uncle Cardboards Limited Jamboree, and today we are doing part 1 of our 10-part series. Yes, 10 parts that looks at every single archetype in Crimson Vow Draft. We're going to identify overall archetypes. We're going to look at what some of the winners are, some of the losers, some of the traps. And this is a great place to start if maybe you didn't have a lot of experience with this draft format. If you're looking for a little bit of an edge, all of this is data-based information that comes from 17lands.com users. So I'm looking at stats like how much better were players' win rates if they drew a card, or what does a card do week over week if we adjust for just how much that archetype won overall. So I'm going to try and make the numbers really simple as always and super digestible so you can take this information, do something actionable with it. Part 1 of the series is going to start with LiQWYD. Yes, we're going to start in Azorius, the Skies deck, but it's Skies with a little sneaky disturb action in there. So overall, your game plan is to play kind of a quote-unquote tempo game and just trade some early creatures that you have and then disturb them back onto other creatures where you can get additional value out of them. There are some rares that prioritize either spirits or enchantments, and you'll get some synergies there. But overall, you're going to win in the air and then use cheap removal to deal with your opponent's larger threats. There's a lot of really great stuff when you look at cards like Fierce Retribution, which is just a 2-mana kill something that's attacking you, which is great if you're trying to race down an opponent's werewolves. You also have cards like Valorous Stance, which do double duty of helping protect your big, your powerful flyers that you get in this format, while also being able to take care of a gnarly vampire. So according to the data, our top 5 rares. Number 1 is Wedding Announcement, which does a great job of either getting you card advantage or just some little blocking bodies, and then at the end of the day gives your whole squad a +1/+1 bonus, which is huge in a deck that's generating a lot of spirit tokens and trying to get there in the air. Number 2 is Catilda Dawnheart Martyr, again, card that cares about spirits and enchantments, so what could be any better in this deck? But it also comes back itself to give something flying lifelink and that same bonus. So just really busted stuff and a great build around early, or something that should just work well in your Azorius deck if you get it later on. Number 3 is Dreamshackle Geist, and this is a great way to win any race because your opponents can't really attack with anything and expect for it to ever untap again. It can also just tap down a critical blocker so you can get through, so another just really solid 3-drop. Next, we have our first mythic on the list, which is Faithbound Judge, and this also does double duty of coming down as an immediate blocker and then morphing into a real flying threat, with just the added bonus of, and it also just wins you the game if you get into a board stall with an opponent. And then your 5th top game in hand win rate, rare or mythic in Azorius, is Welcoming Vampire. Also makes sense. You got a ton of these little flyers that are entering. You're able to get some free cards off of this, which is great. And there are cards like Brinecomber, which is our kind of mythic uncommon for this particular archetype, which can generate you creatures on their turn. So while, there is the drawback on Welcoming Vampire of only being able to activate the ability once per turn, or the ability only triggers once per turn, you can still find little ways to get creatures otherwise. So one thing that you'll note there is that 4 of those are flyers and all 5 are 3-drops. And that's kind of a conundrum for this deck, that a lot of your best rares are going to be these 3-drops. And then additionally, you've got Brinecomber, like I mentioned, or Kindly Ancestor, which is one of your other all-star commons that are all at this 3 slot. So it's definitely something I'm cognizant of while I'm building this deck. In terms of cards that are on theme, I think obviously, Brinecomber, as we just mentioned, is a card that you're always going to be looking to play. It does everything you want, coming down and getting you 2 bodies right away. You can potentially generate more bodies with the Comer, or you can bring it back later. But One of the best commons that I think has been undervalued is Heron Blessed Geist. And this is a 5 mana 3/3 flyer, but you can exile it from your graveyard to generate 2 more spirits at sorcery speed if you control an enchantment. And this is a decent curve topper in a deck that sometimes doesn't have a lot to do later. You're pretty much just trying to double spell, but it gives you something that kind of fills out the top of your curve while also generating spirit tokens, which can be really impactful. If you have a wedding announcement in play, that's a pair of 2/2 flyers, which seems great. If you have that welcoming vampire, you're going to draw a card off of those. And generally, you're going to find that you have an enchantment in play, whether it's something like Sigarda's Imprisonment or just a Disturb aura that you've brought back. At uncommon, obviously Brian Comer is going to be your MVP. I'll give an honorable mention though to Geistlight Snare. And Geistlight Snare you'll find often plays more like Mana Leak in this deck than anything else. And it can be really confusing for your opponent because they generally think of your counter spells as either a Syncopate, which would be a Syncopate for 1 if you have, 1 blue and a random land up, or they think about it as a Siphon Essence, which costs 3. So you can get some sneaky counters in with Geistlight Snare, and it's almost always going to be under a cost. So definitely, I'm fine to play 1 in most of these decks. Just look at what your build looks like, but don't discount it altogether because I do really think that you want some counters in here. In terms of your worst kind of cards that it seems like they would be super intuitive to put in here, but I generally don't find that they work. At common, we're going to have Steelclad Spirit. It's a 3/3 and it can only attack or it loses defender if you cast an enchantment. In general, that's not something that you're looking to do. You're winning through the air, and so you're not going, oh, well, I'll just kind of put down this meaningless 3/3 because a lot of times it's just going to be outclassed pretty quickly. Doesn't quite block as well as I had expected it to. At uncommon, Dawnheart Geist, which gets you 2 life every time that you cast an enchantment, just never felt right. And I think you would look at it and go, well, I'm in the enchantment deck, might as well gain some life. That's going to help keep me in these games. In general, I'm out on it. I'm also going to give an honorable mention to 2 cards that looked like they were going to play well at Disturb and didn't really pan out in Mischievous Catgeist and Gutter Skulker. Now, of the 2, I think Catgeist is possible to play if you're running the correct number of Scattered Thoughts and can get it into your graveyard for free, but otherwise, you're just not looking to go through the cycle of telegraphing that you have a Catgeist to your opponent, having it die in play, and then nervously trying to put it onto a creature. It creates a nightmare scenario for blowouts. Gutter Skulker, you just never really wanted because A, you want to attack with a large number of things, and B, most of your threats already are evasive. You're trying to get there in the air, Gutter Skulker ain't there. Our biggest hole in this deck turns out to be our 2-drop slot. Because of this reason, I am prioritizing Stormchaser Drake over almost every other uncommon that isn't named Brian Comer. It really comes in, gives you an immediate evasive threat, and it's an excellent target for a lot of your Disturb auras because it's just going to net you cards. So I definitely would make sure that you're prioritizing 2-drops when you see them. At common, really Draw the Skull Infantry is the only one that you actively want. So that makes it really tough. You have to lean on uncommons, which are unpredictable. So I also put an emphasis on a card like Fleeting Spirit, which can work with some of your spirit synergies, and sometimes it's just going to be beneficial to discard a card to it and get value out of the aura side faster. You also get Panic Bystander, which I'm not as big of a fan of, but it's fine. You can play Panic Bystander. You're going to have a lot of creatures. They will die, and sometimes that little bit of life can help you win a race. You'll also be sometimes playing a Traveling Minister package and be gaining a little bit of life with that, plus Heron of Hope, which will cause that Bystander to flip. Now, you don't get the Death Touch side of it, womp womp, but it is a 3/5 blocker at that point that you paid a low 2 mana for. In terms of our best commons by overall win rate to end the season, it's basically these 6 cards in no particular order. Fierce Retribution, Kindly Ancestor, Lantern Bearer, Traveling Minister, Sigarda's Imprisonment, and a big surprise to me, Scattered Thoughts. So what I did was I took a look at what the win rate for Azorius was each week, and then the game in hand win rate of Scattered Thoughts. Scattered Thoughts exceeded the average win rate of Azorius every single week for the last 8 weeks, which is awesome. So what makes sense is A, you want to be able to have a way to refill your hand. B, you don't actually mind putting some of these cards into the graveyard. And C, hey, 4 cards is a great number of cards. Even if you have to dump 2 of them, sometimes you're really only dumping 1.5 or 1. So I really think that Scattered Thoughts is great value here because on average it's going about pick 9 is when people are taking it. So when you're getting value like that over a card like, say, I don't know, Alchemist's Retrieval, which is going around the same rate, but really doesn't get you the same number of wins in Azorius, I call that a win. In terms of cards that I'm a little down on towards the end of the format, it's actually a pair of 2-mana auras in Nurturing Presence and Cradle of Safety. Now, I don't think that they're necessarily bad cards, but I think that you really, especially in the case of Nurturing Presence, have to be able to build around these cards successfully. If you're playing 3 Brinecombers, I'm happy with Nurturing Presence because it's going to net me a lot more than just that single 1/1 and a one-off kind of bonus. You're going to be able to net some real value off of that. In terms of Cradle of Safety, I think it comes down to what kind of threats you have in your deck. Are you going to be able to cast a Dream Shackle Geist and also have blue and a colorless to back it up so that you can protect it? It's tough. And so if you have the right kind of cheap threats and can just get them through one turn, then I don't really mind having a Cradle of Safety in there. And then the final card that I'm a little down on is Heron of Hope. I think that broadly people are playing this thinking, it's just some extra life, but it really isn't exactly what you want to be doing with this deck because sinking mana into activating its ability when you need that to do disturb things, to cast Scattered Thoughts, to counter your opponent's spells, it really sets you back. And the data has shown that it has been below average in terms of those like top tier cards over the last 3 weeks to end the format. And it's only been above average 2 out of the 8 weeks. So something to definitely look at there. Some cards I think might surprise people are a couple of counter spells in Siphon Essence. Siphon Essence, which was above average 6 out of 8 weeks, as well as Syncopate. I think that you definitely want Siphon Essence before you want Syncopate, as that blood token is a very real bonus for this deck, and it can do meaningful things with it. Again, when you can either trade in lands or pitch a disturb creature earlier rather than later, or having to worry about it dying in combat to get some cool bonus, that can really be big. And this is a deck that doesn't have access to blood outside of that and Sigarda's Imprisonment. So definitely don't mind playing Siphon Essence, Geistlight Snare, some kind of minor counter package along with your card draw in Scattered Thoughts, and then a card like Thirst for Discovery. Okay, that's been Azorius. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to leave them in the comments or the review, or find me on Twitter. All of my links can be found at linktr.ee/UncleCardboard. And we'll be back next episode with Green-White. Celestia is coming. Hey everybody, it's your favorite uncle, reminding you to check out the Open Draft Project, where I sit down with your favorite pros, streamers, and limited grinders. They do the exact same draft seed, and then we see what's going on in their heads. If you are brand new to draft, or you're like me and draft way too much, there's always something that you can take away from this series where we talk to some of the greatest draft minds in the world. Check it out.